My name is Betty Barth. I am a former first grade teacher from Vero Beach Elementary School and Sebastian Elementary, but I am currently the VBE 1, 2, 3 GI. So I do reading interventions with first grade, second grade, and third grade, also known as the PGI. It's lots of names. And I'm going to present for you how to create healthy relationships within your classroom, and they really have to start with harmony. So before I start, I just want to show you, I'm going to base this on my class last year. I want you to see their cute little faces. And this was the very first day of school. We had just picked carpet spots, like very first thing we did, and I took a picture so I wouldn't forget. And I want you to just notice kind of their body language, their kind of awkward, nervous smiles a little bit. And then I want you to close your eyes because I'm going to paint a little picture for you of my very first day of school in a very quick way. So the very first day of school was 7.5 hours of bliss. I went home and told my boyfriend, OMG, this year is going to be the best. Everyone listened, everyone was compliant, we got everything done, and it was fun. I want you to open your eyes. Now I'm going to tell you reality of 7.5 hours later, or 24 hours later. The second day of school, you know that when you first start a school year, there's that really nice honeymoon phase. Normally lasts about 1 week, 1.5 weeks. Yeah, mine lasted 7.5 hours. Because the very next day I went to school and it was utter chaos, and not chaos in a good way. It was like I had someone pick up my really compliant, sweet, adorable children from the day before and just replaced them with totally different children. So I had to do a lot of problem solving last year, and good thing I was part of the Learning Alliance, what did we call it last year? Moonshot Mondays, because it gave me an outlet to share what I was doing and get kind of like not recognition, but I can't think of the word. Validation, thank you. That what I was going through was not just me, but that it was crazy and I was not nuts. And gave me kind of an outlet to share my ideas and see, everyone made me feel better. So the first thing I really started incorporating was the Sanford Harmony meetup. And that was a little difficult at first because, you know, our district did not get all of the kits like they were supposed to, which happens. So I really had no supplies. My first thing I did was I went on to the Sanford Harmony website and I created a username and a password. And that kind of opened up a really good kind of solution for one of my main problems. And I had really found that the main problem was that my students did not have, most of them did not have healthy, strong relationships at home. And so the way they were acting was what they were used to. Some of them lived in chaos, so chaos was happening in the classroom. But it was one of those classes where you have 12 children that are like that, not 6. So it was very, very hard. So I learned through the Sanford Harmony website that the meetup has 4 different components, and I'll go into those in a sec. Well, I kind of tweaked it. I had 4 different components in mind, and I'll tell you those in a minute. But if you would like to incorporate meetup in your classroom, or you already are, there are 3 main things you really want to do before you can get started and have it be very successful. So the first thing you want to do is choose a meetup spot. So I just took a picture offline. I love him, kindergarten smorgasbord. But that's kind of how my meetup area would look. I had a square carpet. The kids were allowed to pick a spot around wherever they wanted that day. And that worked out good because their shoulder partner wasn't always the same person every morning. Then you also want to make sure that you teach procedures for how and when to come to the meetup space. My school does free play first thing in the morning as the kids are trickling in, and then we have a song play. So that song was just very naturally their way of cleaning up free play real quick and come to the carpet before the song's over. And then you want to create harmony goals with your students. And this was one of the ultimate game changers last year for me. My students had never been taught what a goal was and how to follow through with it. They had always kind of been told what to do, and sometimes not in a very nice way. So it was nice to get their input. It was hilarious. And it was nice to see them follow through with goals. Now, in a perfect world, we would have set the goals, we'd work on them for a few weeks, and it would have been great. This was every single day last year. We worked on goal setting and following through with goals, and oops, it's cool if the goal fails, and look, you discovered this about yourself because that goal failed. So it was nice perseverance. So just to show you kind of what ours were, we had a bunch throughout the year. We changed them every month, or we changed them as they were accomplished. But 3 main ones that kind of stuck were keep your hands and your feet to yourself, follow directions the first time, and be a kind friend to others. So those were kind of the 3 that you would see pop back in periodically, because those were the main problems my students had. So I was always very used to doing responsive classroom morning meeting, which is like my morning meeting heart is at. So I struggled a little bit at first, and I just decided to kind of incorporate the 2. So the very first thing we do when everyone is on the carpet is we do our greeting, and I did it the Sanford Harmony way, but I also sometimes would incorporate different responsive classroom techniques. So the students greet each other in a different language using a firm handshake and eye contact, and I know that sounds just very simple, but that was also a game changer for my students. They had never been taught how to appropriately communicate with each other. So it was very nice to see them doing that with strangers who would come into the classroom and with each other on a daily basis. And they would always do it with their shoulder buddies. So that's why I didn't have a specific spot for them to sit during morning meeting, because they always had a couple different people to greet every morning. Then we would go into sharing and responding. So students would turn and talk to share, and I would give them a prompt to share about. Then one student would share out, and I would either use stick pick on my phone, or I'd just throw our animal buddy to a random child. And after that student shared, the next student would call on 2 others who wanted to ask a question or make a connection about what they shared. And then the third component was to monitor our goals. So that went back to the anchor chart we had with our main goals on them, and we did that every single morning. I used whole brain teaching gestures with words, and after I modeled a couple times, the kids, one of them would lead it, and they would just very quickly go through the goals with their gestures and words. The kids would repeat, and then the high and the low was the super powerful part. So that was a little bit of a struggle at first, because it kind of morally, I had a little bit of a problem calling children out in front of each other. It made me feel bad almost to acknowledge the lows, because first graders don't keep it anonymous. They want to call out the first person's name who did something bad. But that ended up being a really good thing for my class, because they got okay with accepting when they were wrong and apologizing and fixing it, and they really internalized that. So 2 students would share. One would share a high that they noticed from the day before, like Debbie was being such a kind friend to me. She helped me on the playground when I fell. And then we would all, cheer. And then a low. Sometimes we would have 2 lows in a morning. So-and-so did not listen to Miss Barth, and she got very upset. And then we would talk it through. And then the last thing was the quick connection. And that's where I incorporate these fun activities that Deborah was talking about in the very beginning of the year. I have more time for morning meeting before RTI starts. So that was when I incorporated a lot of the arts and crafts and the getting to know you a little bit longer, but throughout the year it gets very short. So I just did a kind of a sample one for you. So the students would greet each other in the French way. So they would go to their partner and say, what's your name?
Bill.
Bonjour, Bill.
Bonjour.
Betty. And then they would turn to the next person, and then they would 3 sit down. Sharing and responding. The students turn and talk to share their favorite book and 2 reasons why it's their favorite. Then you pick your share out. Monitor your harmony goals, like I just told you about with the hand gestures. And the quick connection, you could do something like the game That's Me, where they stand up and sit back down. Now this next one, I have a handout for you. So the meetup, we got it rocking and rolling, and it was doing awesome. I was seeing such a difference in my students, but it still wasn't enough to meet their social emotional needs. So halfway through the school year, I found out that I was not the only class that was going through that. First grade as a whole was having a very difficult time last year. So we decided to pump the brakes and pause. And as soon as we got back from break, our whole grade level planned a 2-week-long social emotional unit. Now, this was like a dire need. We had children being suspended for days, violence, like a lot of things happening that really our principal was like, whoa, we got to do something. Instruction just couldn't take place. So my teammates and I, there were 5 of us, we each planned for a different social skill. Mine that I planned was for self-soothing. So I shared that with you if you would like it. It's a few just little quick lessons. Yes, please. Thank you. So I'm not going to go through this because this is something that you could use on your own later if you want. But there are just little mini lessons. They follow a lot of the Class Dojo video series. It incorporates the mindful breathing, so it allowed me to remind my children how to breathe, but also gave us different techniques that we weren't using, so it wasn't so boring. Mindful movements, so it taught them yoga. And then this was like the one thing that I wished I had done in August, because this made our second half of the year so much, I don't want to say better because the first half wasn't horrible, but just calmer. You could see that my students weren't so violent. I had children being removed by the deputy, very violent. So it was nice. It also, I've always struggled with having a safe space in my classroom because, I would set it up all cute and it would be perfect, and then the kids would trash it every single day. I'd go over there, my stuff was cut up, my stuff was destroyed, then you get frustrated, you wasted your money, da-da-da-da-da. So I don't ever know why I didn't think of it, but I read something online that you should never call your safe space a safe space. You should call it a mindful space, because your whole classroom should be a safe space. But if you call it a mindful space, it gives the children a place, or you could have multiple places, for them to go and really focus on being mindful of their emotions at the time, at that moment. So it allows them also to practice that self-regulation in a very structured way. So after I taught all of these self-soothing techniques, we went into lessons that really focus on creating a mindful space within our classroom. It also eliminates disruptions and outbursts during teaching time, so that student who throws things is in the corner throwing things at the wall, where that is before they need to get it out and be mindful, instead of throwing things at students or at you or across the classroom when you're trying to teach. So if you use this, make sure you check out the Class Dojo videos. They're awesome. Now, this was the other thing I had never thought of, and I felt like, duh, I should have been doing that. I let the kids design the space. So I went online, and I went around my classroom, and I just grabbed random things that I thought would be very soothing, but also interactive for the children. So some of the things, we had stuffed animals. I had the brain toys that Liz did in her brain training a long time ago, a journal, pencil, crayons, and the calming bottles, and like an exercise ball. And then I also went online and I found some new strategies that I wanted to incorporate, like the zones of regulation, which was really powerful as well. Breathing techniques, and just like a poster where they could really go and first identify how they were feeling before they worked on getting out of that feeling. So since I brought everything and let them pick it, our mindful space never got destroyed for the rest of the school year. And I was out with the flu a lot and a lot going on with my mom last year, so I was out a lot, and every time I came back, things were cut up and destroyed and just wrecked. But this is what our mindful space ended up being like, and it was really cute doing the lessons with them because they were so involved with it and they really took ownership of it. So they decided that they wanted their mindful space to stay in the corner, which is by a bathroom, but we moved this bookshelf in front of it. And it's on wheels. So if the child was feeling like they really don't want anyone to see them because they were so upset, they could move it and kind of corner themselves in the corner, which helped. And then on the back, it had bookshelf. So before, we just had kind of stuff thrown up there and it was never taken care of. But one of my students, who really surprised me, decided that we should not only put the things in a certain place, but label them so that you could remember where things go, because he said maybe it's not our fault, maybe we just forget where it goes. He had a valid point. So we have labels all throughout. And then we had a little boy join our class named Maureen. He's kind of my success story. He was in a self-contained K through 3 classroom, and he was in self-contained for pre-K. And he was very, very bright child. Academically, he did not need to be in a self-contained ESC classroom. So they decided just to kind of throw him in a gen ed class. And it was hard at first, but he flourished because of the things like this. And it was really sweet. The kids decided that he needed to put his journal there, and the kids decided we needed to have the little labels so no one else would use it, because kids were going and writing curse words with his name, trying to make it seem like he was doing that. So I thought that was really precious and sweet. So the key is having them design it. It was like mind blown. And then I want you to just try to remember that, that very first picture from the very first day of school, because Stanford Harmony Meetup and the Buddy Up, which I didn't have a chance to do every day, but I did most days. and these mindful lessons really created this. So you see one of my students here who, I mean, if I told you about his home life, you would just burst into tears. He had a hard time socializing, but his book buddies, he made sure that they were on task and reading, and he shared his books with them. That he did that all himself. It was adorable. And then one of my hardest groups to manage at my table ended up being one of my most manageable groups, and that's Orvain right there. We do bucket filling in my classroom, and Orvain filled his first bucket, and he was so proud of himself. But I want you to notice the kids behind him, because it's not just the power and how proud of he is. You can see the children in the background are truly proud of him, too. And then one of the last days of school, just how connected my students really, really were. So can you tell the difference in their body language and their faces? And then this was really exciting because our school does VIP lunch up on the stage, and my class is always the one who's getting in trouble at lunch, and the last VIP lunch we earned it. So it was really, really exciting. So that's it.